Every year prior to gardening season, I stop and marvel at how amazing our homegrown compost is. And every year I say to myself, I'm gonna make a video explaining how easy it is and how incredible it is. This stuff, I just tilled it over, is like chocolate cake. And it's really simple to put together. There's really only 4 things you need, and I'd like to tell you about them in this video. So let's get to it. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, then you probably know how abundant our garden seems to be year after year. It seems like our yields, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, peppers, various veggies just keep getting better and better every year. Now, with a few exceptions, things like squash bugs and Bermuda grass, kitchen garden that we have is just in great shape, and we always get so much food from it every year. One of the things I attribute that success to is our compost. In fact, I think that's the main thing that I attribute our success to, is our homegrown compost. It's a very simple system that we have. So in each garden bed, we have our topsoil, easy enough. And before we plant, say this is our new plant, before we plant our new start, we just lay down some of our beautiful homemade compost. We mound it up right where we're gonna put our plant, pop it in. Sometimes, depending on the plant, I'll dig down into the topsoil and then fill it in. The idea is the same. We don't need to cover the entire bed with this rich compost. It's just in the spots where we put our veggie starts. That's the whole system. I'll show this system in action when we put our starts in the ground in about 2 weeks. But again, the cornerstone to this method is having really good, rich compost. Stuff like this, and your plants love it. It actually kind of was discovered by accident, just by being lazy about it. We have incredible compost that served us year over year with really awesome yields. So how did we create this magical chocolate cake compost? One of the very first things we did when we moved here was put a little bucket in between our stove and our sink in our kitchen, where we collect food scraps. Eggshells, coffee grounds, onion peels, banana peels, any leftovers of the kitchen process. We put them in that bucket and we started dumping them outside in our designated compost pile. It's moved around on the homestead a couple times since we've been here. Now it's back here. We chose a spot that was kind of partially shaded because we didn't want it to get full sun and bake out. We wanted it to retain moisture. So that's why we ended up with the spot that we chose, was because it was a partially sunny spot. And that's my very first tip for when you're setting your compost pile, is find a spot that's partially shaded to help your compost pile retain moisture. We go through a lot of kitchen scraps, so it didn't take long for us to build up a pretty sizable amount of kitchen waste there in the compost pile. That was the first primary ingredient that we did. Really not burning any calories. We're just taking our kitchen waste and dumping it in a spot. Not hard. Kitchen scraps, that's ingredient number 1, and that's your nitrogen. Now, the second ingredient is your carbon. It's very easy. All we used for carbon was dead leaves. That's it. Maybe a little bit of grass clippings. And we tried to use a formula of 2-to-1. We're out of the building season right now for our compost, but I kept a big pile of just dead leaves right in this nook of our compost, and just piled them on whenever I had a new dump of kitchen scraps. So again, for my nitrogen to carbon ratio, for every scoop of kitchen waste, I like to have at least 2 scoops of dead leaves. You don't have to measure it out or get fancy with it, just eyeball it. That's about 2 scoops worth of dead leaves compared to my 1 scoop of kitchen scraps. The third ingredient, soil from your land. That's easy. All I've done is just literally take a shovel full of earth, try to get it as weed-free as possible, dump it in the compost. This is especially important and in the beginning of your compost pile because it adds thickness and substance to your compost pile. Again, I like to shoot for a 2-to-1 ratio of dirt to your original kitchen scraps. After you get it going, you won't need to do this anymore. That's why I'm not adding that much in here. But when you get going, get some topsoil in there. If you don't have good topsoil on your land, you can always buy some at a hardware store. Doesn't have to be that much. It's just to get you going and add some thickness to your compost pile. If you've got chickens in a chicken pen like we do, and you have deep bedding like we do, let me dig down to this. The stuff at the bottom of our deep bedding is typically broken down really well. And that actually is something that we've used as brown matter. The important thing is that we've made sure that it's had time to break down, typically over a year. I realize a lot of people watching this may not have deep bedding, that's been sitting that long? We have. So if you have chickens and they're in a pen and you use a deep bedding system like we do, take advantage of the stuff in the bottom of your carbon pile to serve as your carbon. That stuff's good. All the poop from the chickens has broken down really well and is a great amendment to your compost. And that's actually what we use for our carbon element of our compost. And we've been doing that now for a few years. The other ingredient that we use in our compost is a couple handfuls of ash from our bonfire. You don't want to overdo it with this. That's why I only sprinkle in a couple handfuls worth. But this is a great source of potassium for our compost. Anecdotally, it's worked great. When I initially started with our compost pile, I got a little overboard with our ash or charcoal, and the compost wasn't breaking down properly. It was too thick, and I think it affected the pH level of the compost. So starting, I think 2 years ago, I just sprinkled a little bit in our compost, and it seems to have made a pretty good difference. When I add the ash, I just sprinkle it around the compost. And I typically try to do this maybe once every month or even once every couple of months. Again, it's good to be sparing with the ash. But what if you don't have ash or you don't have access to wood ash? Well, what's the first thing you think of when you think of potassium? Bananas. So we add banana peels in with our kitchen scraps anyways. So enough banana peels, roll them in there. That's going to add a good amount of potassium to your compost bed. Since I've already got banana peels in here, I'm not going to add the ash. I'm just saying this is something really good to get going when you're starting your compost pile. Is just sprinkle in a couple handfuls of ash. The recipe is really simple. 1 part kitchen scrap, which is your nitrogen, 2 parts brown matter, things like leaves or dried grass clippings, that's your carbon, 2 parts topsoil, especially when you're getting started. That adds mineral content and fills out your compost pile, and a sprinkling, a handful or 2 of ash for potassium. That's all we've done. Now that you got your ingredients in place, what do? How often do you need to turn it? Well, we've only turned our compost over about once a season. We just pile it up. In the fall, this compost pile is way above the top of these pallets here. That's because we don't turn it. We rarely turn it. Like I said, maybe once a season. Once you get to spring, where we're at now, that's when I want to go in with the tiller, the garden tiller, and run through it, which I just did yesterday. So I'm actually not going to mix in these leaves and kitchen scraps right now. I'm going to move them over to our storage pile, but just think of them building up layer after layer over the seasons. Fall is great for just layering up your compost. Same with the summer, honestly, and especially the winter. But once you get to spring and you're actually going to use the compost, that's when you're going to want to come in with the tiller or whatever method you use to turn it. Maybe it's just a shovel, and you turn it over and you get it ready to actually use in the garden. The beauty of compost is that this is a long-term project and there's a lot of room for error. So experiment, throw things in there. I just have a few rules of things that I won't put in the compost. For instance, anything that won't break down. So plastics, metal, things that you probably wouldn't consider putting in the compost in the first place. There's also some sneaky things that I won't put in there. I typically won't put in any meats or oily things or very smelly things. You can. The reason I don't is just because it attracts critters and they dig through my compost. There was a time when I put in, there's some leftover meat that we weren't able to eat, and I put it in the compost, and the next morning my compost had been completely dug through by raccoons or skunks or whatever, and there's raccoon poop and skunk poop. Critters will take advantage of your compost pile if you put stinky things in there. I also won't put anything with chemicals in it. If there's some sort of plant that it's questionable whether it's been treated with some kind of chemical, I won't put it in there. Anything organic, anything that breaks down, it's a good candidate for putting in here. How long is this going to take? Well, if you follow the method that I laid out here and add those ingredients, it should take you 6 months to a year to have something similar to this. The pile won't be as big as I've got here just because it takes time to build up. This compost is 5 years of work right here. If you follow that method, give it a year, and I'd say you have really good usable compost that you can start putting in your garden. So think a year ahead. Now, this is all anecdotal. This is just our own experience, but I think our results speak for themselves. This stuff is incredible. It's very easy if you want to get a compost bed going. And like I said, this is a forgiving process. You don't need to worry too much about the ins and outs of it. Just continue to add stuff. Continue to add Your kitchen scraps continue to add brown matter, and within a year, I think you'll be sitting pretty on a nice bed of this beautiful stuff. Do you guys have any hacks for your compost pile? I'd love to hear about them. What we're doing works, but if there's any way to tweak the process or make it even more effective, I'm all ears. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with us, guys, and until we see you again next time, remember, as always, slowly, slowly.